Have
I
you
didn't
ever
expect
laughed
you
at
to know how to
someone,
use these.
thinking they were beneath you, only to
You'd be
discover they
surprised
were
what I can
far
handle.
greater than you imagined? When this boss mocked her janitor and dared him to fly a helicopter, she thought it was just a joke. But what happened next left everyone speechless. Before we go on, allow me to wish you peace and good health. Tell me from which country and at what time are you watching this story? No one at Skypath Aviation ever expected the janitor to know how to fly a helicopter, least of all their boss, Evelyn Chase. The morning sun had just climbed over the red cliffs of Sedona, spilling its light into the metal ribs of the hangar. The air smelled of coffee and machine oil. Mechanics moved about with clipboards and wrenches, and the rhythmic clanking echoed like a distant song of work. Evelyn arrived the way she always did, heels clicking, phone in one hand, confidence in the other. She was the kind of woman who made people stand straighter when she entered, not because she asked them to, but because she didn't have to. At 37, she had the sharpness of someone who'd built her own path in a man's world. Her late father had founded Skypath, a small aviation company that serviced charter helicopters for wealthy tourists coming to see Sedona's desert skies. Since his passing, Evelyn had taken the controls, and she didn't intend to let anyone doubt that she could fly higher than him. "Morning, folks," she called, her voice cutting through the whir of an air compressor. "Let's make sure this demo goes perfectly. We have investors flying in from Phoenix." Her words fell like orders disguised as encouragement. People nodded, quick and cautious. Noah Reddington was already there, as he always was, long before anyone else. He had finished mopping the concrete floor, moving quietly between the parked aircraft, like a shadow no one bothered to see. He wore a faded gray jumpsuit, sleeves rolled to the elbows, and an old baseball cap that had seen too many summers. His hands were rough but steady, his back straight. Sam Harlow, the chief mechanic, gave him a small nod while tightening a bolt. "You beat us again, Noah," he said. "Old habits," Noah replied, his voice low, almost carried away by the sound of the hangar door sliding open. Evelyn didn't glance at him as she passed, her perfume briefly cutting through the scent of oil and dust. "Make sure the floor's spotless before noon," she said. "Yes, ma'am," he answered without looking up. There was no edge in his tone, no resentment, just calm acceptance, like someone who had learned that silence was easier than confrontation. By mid-morning, the new helicopter gleamed under the lights, its black and silver body polished enough to reflect every curious face. Evelyn walked around it, inspecting each detail, while a small group of employees followed her like a quiet entourage. Her heels clicked against the concrete, sharp and precise. "Now this," she said, resting a hand on the fuselage, "is what success looks like." She smiled at the small crowd. Who wants to be the first to take her for a spin? A few nervous laughs floated up. Nobody moved. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, pretending surprise. "Come on, gentlemen, no volunteers? What about you, Sam?" The old mechanic chuckled. "I fix them, ma'am. I don't fly them." Her gaze shifted, landing on the man sweeping the far end of the hangar. "What about you, Noah?" she said, her tone light, playful in a way that wasn't meant to be kind. "If you can fly this thing, Noah, I'll marry you." Laughter broke out, bouncing off the metal walls. It was the kind of laughter that fills the air when no one wants to be silent. Even Sam forced a smile, though he looked down almost immediately. Noah paused, his broom mid-stroke. The light caught his face weathered, calm, unreadable. He didn't smile back. He simply set the broom aside, wiped his hands on his coveralls, and started walking toward the helicopter. At first, no one believed he was serious. Evelyn tilted her head, an amused smile curling her lips. "What are you doing?" "Just taking you up on your offer," he said softly. The laughter stumbled, unsure whether to continue. Sam froze, eyes narrowing. Noah climbed into the cockpit with the kind of ease that came from repetition, not curiosity. His hands, rough from years of work, moved over the instrument panel like they remembered every dial, every switch. The sound of the ignition filled the air, low at first, then growing steady and confident. The rotor blades began to turn, slow and graceful, stirring up a halo of dust around the chopper. The others stepped back, shielding their faces. Evelyn stood still, disbelief creeping over her expression as the machine lifted a few feet from the ground, stable, centered, controlled. Nobody laughed now. Noah's eyes stayed focused on the horizon through the windshield. For a brief second, something changed in his face, not pride, but peace. Then, as smoothly as he had lifted it, he brought the helicopter back down, the landing gear touching the ground with barely a tremor. When the engine stilled, a heavy silence settled over the hangar. Dust floated in the golden light. Noah stepped down, picked up his broom, and said quietly, "You can continue your demonstration, ma'am." Evelyn couldn't find her voice. Around her, the employees exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to applaud or disappear. The sound of the spinning blade still echoed in her ears long after the machine had gone still. She tried to say something, a joke, a dismissal, anything but the words refused to come. He walked past her toward the back of the hangar, the broom balanced on his shoulder. The sunlight caught his profile, revealing a faint scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. She hadn't noticed it before, and for reasons she couldn't explain, she watched him longer than she meant to, her heart beating louder than the silence he left behind. Evelyn stood frozen, staring at the quiet man as the echo of the rotor faded, realizing this wasn't just a joke anymore. For the first time in a long while, Evelyn Chase didn't know what to do with silence. It clung to the air like dust that refused to settle. The laughter she had started minutes ago now felt cruel, hollow, the kind that echoes longer than it should. She smoothed her blazer, pretending to adjust her sleeves just to hide the tremor in her hands. Sam Harlow was the first to move. He wiped his forehead with the back of his wrist, leaving a faint streak of grease. "Guess we all learned something today," he muttered, half to himself, half to the wind. Evelyn didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the spot where the helicopter had hovered steady, sure, alive. The same machine that had looked so intimidating in its stillness now felt tamed, as if it had recognized its true pilot. She turned toward Sam, her voice quieter than usual. "How long has he worked here?" "Almost 3 years," Sam said. "Never late, never talks much, just cleans, fixes small stuff when nobody's looking." He hesitated before adding, "Used to be something more, you can tell." Evelyn frowned. "Something more?" Sam gave a half smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You can always tell who's touched the sky, ma'am. They never really come back down." That sentence lingered in her head as she walked back toward her office, the echo of her own heels strangely foreign now. She passed by the row of framed photos hanging along the hallway, pictures of helicopters, smiling executives, charity galas, all perfectly posed, perfectly lifeless. None of them looked like the moment she had just witnessed. From her office window, she could see Noah again, back to sweeping the far end of the hangar. Nothing in his posture betrayed what he'd just done. He didn't look proud, or defiant, or even satisfied. Just at peace. She leaned closer to the glass, whispering to herself, "Who are you, really?" Outside, the late morning light grew harsher, shimmering off the metal wings of the helicopter. Workers resumed their routine, though the rhythm of the hangar had changed. There was a weight in the air, respect, curiosity, maybe even shame. By noon, word had spread through the entire company. Some joked nervously in the break room, trying to recover the mood. Others spoke softly about the way Noah's hands had moved, precise, confident, like someone who'd done it 1,000 times before. Evelyn spent most of the afternoon behind closed blinds. She told herself she was preparing for the investor meeting, but her thoughts kept circling back to that single moment when the helicopter rose into the air and the look in Noah's eyes. It wasn't rebellion or pride. It was something she couldn't name, something that unsettled her more than mockery ever could. When the meeting ended, she stayed late, long after the others had gone home. The hangar lights glowed like stars through the office window. A storm was forming in the distance, wind pushing dry leaves across the tarmac. She walked down to the floor again, heels clicking softly this time. The helicopter stood silent, its reflection trembling under the flicker of fluorescent light. Noah was still there, rinsing a mop in the utility sink. He didn't look up when she approached. "Long day," she said, her voice softer than she intended. He nodded once. "Every day is." Evelyn hesitated. You really know how to handle that thing." "I used to," he replied simply. Something in his tone made her pause. "Used to?" He shrugged, his eyes distant. "Sometimes life teaches you when to let go." The words landed heavier than they should have. Evelyn wanted to ask more, but the wind outside howled through the open hangar door, filling the silence between them. She found herself looking at his hands, strong, scarred, and trembling slightly as he wrung out the mop. For a brief moment, she saw not an employee, not a janitor, but a man who had carried something far heavier than a broom. The thunder rolled closer. She looked up at the gray sky beyond the hangar, realizing how small she felt under it. "Good night, Mr. Reddington," she said finally. "Good night, ma'am." She walked away, her steps slower, her mind louder. That night, while the rain began to patter against the hangar roof, Noah stayed behind to finish his work. The echo of the broom on the wet floor sounded like waves hitting the shore, steady, endless, lonely. And somewhere above the clouds he once called home, lightning flashed just enough to reveal the outline of a man who once knew how to save lives. Now, cleaning the floor of the same kind of machine that had taken everything from him, he turned off the lights, one switch at a time, until the hangar went completely dark. The storm rumbled far away, and for a heartbeat, it sounded like the whir of a helicopter rotor. Outside, the desert night held its breath. Evelyn stood frozen, staring at the quiet man as the echo of the rotor faded, realizing this wasn't just a joke anymore. The rain that evening came soft and slow, like the kind that didn't mean to soak the earth, but just to remind it of thirst. By the time the hangar lights went out, the last echoes of laughter from earlier that day had long vanished, leaving only the quiet hum of distant thunder. Evelyn Chase sat by her living room window, staring into the black stretch of Sedona Canyon, her reflection faintly mirrored on the glass. Her house stood high above the valley, modern, clean, every corner designed to look perfect. But perfection could be a lonely sound, she thought, especially when it echoed back at you. The city below was dotted with scattered lights from diners and motels. Somewhere out there, Noah Reddington was probably still working, rinsing oil and dust from the floors, the same calm expression on his face. She picked up her glass of red wine but didn't drink it. Instead, she turned on the old radio on the kitchen counter. A low, familiar voice came through the late-night program from Flagstaff. "Good evening, friends. Tonight we're talking about humility, how sometimes life grounds us so we can learn to fly again." The words made her pause. She turned the volume down and smiled bitterly. "How convenient," she murmured, setting the glass down. Her phone buzzed on the table, a message from Sam Harlow. "You okay, boss? Don't worry about today. Folks already moved on." Evelyn typed, then deleted, then finally sent, "Yeah, I'm fine. Just surprised, that's all." A moment later, Sam's reply came through. "Noah's full of surprises. Always has been. Good man. Hard passed." Hard passed. The words hooked her curiosity and pulled. She thought of the way his hands had moved over the controls. Steady. Deliberate. No beginner could do that. You couldn't fake calm under motion. She stood and crossed the room, her bare feet quiet on the wooden floor. The walls were decorated with framed photos. Her father smiling beside helicopters, aviation awards, pictures of her as a girl in a pilot's jacket 2 sizes too big. He used to take her to air shows, buy her lemonade, tell her stories of courage and discipline. He'd died 3 years ago, a heart attack mid-flight lesson with a student pilot. Evelyn had watched the company shift, the employees lose faith, the investors retreat. She built it back, brick by brick, with ambition and rules, never letting emotion get in the way. Until now, her gaze lingered on a photo of her father standing by an old rescue chopper. The handwritten note beneath it read, "To fly high, you must first learn to kneel." She whispered the words, almost laughing. "Kneel, huh? You'd love this, Dad. A janitor teaching your daughter a lesson." The rain thickened, tapping the glass like restless fingers. She drew the curtains and turned off the light, but the image of Noah in the cockpit refused to fade. The way he had looked through the windshield, focused, peaceful, unshaken, it haunted her. Sleep didn't come easily that night. When she finally drifted into it, she dreamed of engines roaring in the distance, of a man standing beneath a storm, waiting for something he'd lost. At dawn, the sky was a watercolor of pink and gold. The smell of wet desert earth seeped through the open window. Evelyn made coffee, black and strong, and stood on the porch, watching the first workers' trucks drive toward the airfield. The world looked clean after the rain, like it had forgiven something. She wasn't sure if she had. Her phone rang again, Sam's voice raspy but cheerful. "Morning, boss. Weather's clear. You coming in?" "I'll be there soon," she said. "You planning another test flight?" "Not today. I just need to talk to someone." Sam chuckled softly. Then I'd start with the man who made the whole hangar stop breathing yesterday. She smiled, despite herself. That obvious, huh? It's all anyone's talking about. Guess it's not every day the janitor flies the boss's new helicopter. After hanging up, she sat on the porch steps and sipped her coffee. The aroma mixed with the desert air, cedar, rain, earth. Somewhere in the distance, the faint chime of a church bell carried through the canyon. It was Sunday. She hadn't realized. When she finally got in her car, the sun had already dried most of the puddles. She drove slowly, windows down, hair catching the breeze. The two-lane road wound past red rock cliffs and cottonwood trees that shimmered in the morning light. It was quiet enough that she could hear the hum of cicadas and the soft hiss of her tires against the wet road. By the time she reached the hangar, the crew was already working. Noah's old pickup truck sat in its usual spot near the maintenance shed. Through the open doors, she saw him sweeping again, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Her first instinct was to march in, demand to know his story, remind him who was in charge. But something held her back. The memory of the laughter, and how quickly it had turned to silence, still stung. Instead, she turned off the engine and just watched him. He worked slowly, deliberately, humming to himself a low tune she couldn't recognize. There was something disarming about the way he existed. Steady, unbothered, as if peace was his only rebellion. For a long minute, Evelyn stayed in the car, her hands gripping the steering wheel. Maybe Sam was right. Maybe some people never really come back down once they've touched the sky. She took a deep breath, stepped out, and started walking toward the hangar. The metallic scent of the hangar mixed with the lingering sweetness of rain as Evelyn stepped inside. The hum of tools and faint chatter of the crew echoed through the vast space. Noah didn't notice her at first. He was kneeling beside a toolbox, replacing a cracked light cover, his motions slow and precise. For a moment, she just watched him work. There was something oddly graceful about the way he moved, like every gesture carried intention, as though nothing he did was wasted. When he finally looked up, his expression didn't change. He nodded politely, almost formally. "Morning, ma'am." "Morning," she replied, forcing a steadiness she didn't feel. "Do you have a minute?" He wiped his hands on a rag and stood. "Sure. What can I do for you?" Evelyn hesitated. She had planned to start with confidence, maybe even a touch of authority, but the words came out softer than she intended. "About yesterday. That was quite something." Noah gave a small shrug. "Just muscle memory, I guess." "Muscle memory," she repeated, a faint disbelief in her tone. "You lifted a helicopter off the ground like it was second nature. That's not just memory, Mr. Reddington." He met her gaze for the first time that morning, his eyes calm but unreadable. "Once you've done something long enough, it stays in you even if you wish it didn't." That line caught her off guard. There was sorrow in it, quiet and worn, like a page turned too many times. Evelyn crossed her arms, less out of defiance than to steady herself. "I don't like not knowing things about my own employees," she said. "Who you are, where you come from." "I clean floors," he interrupted gently. "That's who I am here." The words weren't sharp, but they cut just the same. Evelyn opened her mouth, then closed it again. She felt the strange weight of her father's old note echoing in her mind to fly high. "You must first learn to kneel. I owe you an apology," she said finally. "That joke was uncalled for." Noah shook his head. "Don't worry about it. People laugh at what they don't understand. It's easier than asking questions." For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The rhythmic tap of rain dripping from the roof filled the silence. Evelyn looked at him again, at the scar on his face, the steadiness in his eyes. It struck her that he wasn't a man seeking pity. He was a man avoiding it. "You could have embarrassed me," she said quietly. "You didn't." "I don't see the point in making someone small," he answered. "Life does that enough on its own." Her breath caught for a second. She hadn't expected wisdom from a janitor, and maybe that was the problem. From the corner of her eye, she noticed Sam walking by with a wrench, pretending not to listen. His glance said more than words could. "See, boss? Told you he was different." "Would you have coffee with me sometime?" she blurted, the words sounding almost foreign coming out of her mouth. Noah raised an eyebrow. Coffee? I mean, just to talk. About, about flying, maybe? He studied her face for a moment, as though trying to decide if she was joking again. Then he smiled faintly. I'm not much of a talker, ma'am. I'm not much of a listener, she admitted, returning the smile. Maybe we balance each other out. A hint of warmth flickered behind his eyes, then faded as he reached for the mop leaning against the wall. Maybe, he said softly. But I found that some stories sound better when left untold. Evelyn wanted to argue, but something in his tone stopped her. He wasn't being evasive, he was protecting something. Maybe someone. She nodded. All right, but if you ever feel like telling it, I'll be around. He didn't answer. Instead, he dipped the mop into a bucket and began working again, the soft swish of water against concrete, filling the quiet. Evelyn turned to leave, but found herself glancing back one more time. From where she stood, the hangar door framed him like a silhouette against the desert light. Humble, grounded, unshakable. And somehow, she envied that peace. Outside, the sun was climbing higher, burning away the last traces of rain. She stopped by the parking lot, staring up at the clouds drifting apart. The air smelled of wet stone and jet fuel, sharp, alive. When she reached her car, Sam was waiting by the driver's side, hands in his pockets. You talked to him? He asked. I did. And? She exhaled. And I think I've been looking down at someone who's been flying higher than I ever did. Sam grinned. You're not the first one to figure that out. She got in the car, rolled down the window. How well do you know him, Sam? He shrugged. Well enough to know he's not here just to mop floors. Maybe he's trying to make peace with something. Evelyn nodded slowly. Aren't we all? She started the engine and drove off, the tires crunching over gravel. In the rearview mirror, she caught a last glimpse of Noah standing by the open hangar, the sunlight outlining his figure in gold. As she turned onto the main road, she realized her hands were trembling again, not from anger this time, but from something closer to awe. The desert stretched wide around her, endless and quiet. She rolled down the window and let the warm wind rush in, carrying with it the faint echo of spinning rotors she swore she could still hear. And though she didn't understand why, a small smile crept onto her face. The kind that comes when life reminds you there's still something left to learn. She didn't know it yet. But that morning would change more than her pride. It would begin to change her heart. The next morning dawned crisp and golden, the kind of Arizona morning that made even the air taste clean. The red cliffs of Sedona glowed in the early sun, and the faint hum of small aircraft floated in from the airfield down the road. Evelyn Chase drove slower than usual. Windows cracked open, letting the scent of pine and coffee mingle with the breeze. She wasn't heading straight to the hangar this time. Instead, she turned onto a smaller road that curved past the visitor center and stopped beside a little diner with a hand-painted sign, Maple Sky Cafe. She'd passed it countless times before, but had never gone in. This morning felt different. The bell above the door jingled softly as she entered. Inside, the cafe was a patchwork of warm colors, wooden booths polished by years of elbows and laughter, a chalkboard menu smudged with fingerprints, and the comforting hiss of the espresso machine. Behind the counter, a middle-aged waitress in a denim apron smiled. Morning, Honorable. Just you? Evelyn nodded. Yes, please. Coffee? Black. Oh? Coming right up. She slid into a booth near the window, her reflection blending with the view outside, sunlight glinting off the airfield, the faint shimmer of heat beginning to rise. For once, she didn't open her laptop or check her phone. She just watched. Then she saw him. Across the street, Noah Reddington stood beside a boy, maybe 9 or 10 years old, holding what looked like a broken toy helicopter. The boy's face was pinched in frustration, but Noah knelt beside him, patient and calm, showing him how to reattach the small rotor blades. His gestures were slow, deliberate, his voice low and steady. The boy nodded, tried again, then smiled when the blades spun freely. Evelyn couldn't hear their words, but she didn't need to. The sight said enough. The waitress returned with her coffee. You watching those two? She asked with a knowing grin. Evelyn blinked, embarrassed. Oh, just curious. The little boy, does he live around here? The waitress poured more coffee into another mug and set it on a tray. That's Mason Lee. Comes here every morning before school. Sweet kid. The man with him, that's Noah, right? Works at the hangar? Yes, Evelyn said softly. The waitress smiled. He's good with that boy, helps him fix things. His mom works double shifts at the hospital, so he hangs around here till the bus picks him up. Evelyn's gaze returned to the window. Noah was now spinning the toy in his hand, making the boy laugh. He handed it back, and the child ran off toward the cafe door, bursting inside with a grin. "Mr. Noah fixed it," Mason announced proudly, showing off the small helicopter. "That's great, sugar," the waitress said, ruffling his hair. Evelyn smiled. "You really like helicopters, huh?" Mason nodded eagerly. "I'm gonna fly one someday. Mr. Noah says if you're patient, even broken things can fly again." Those words landed like a small stone in Evelyn's chest, rippling through her thoughts. "That's a good lesson," she murmured. "Yep, he says he used to fly big ones for real." Evelyn's head tilted slightly. "He told you that?" "Uh-huh," Mason said, climbing onto a stool. "But he said not to tell people 'cause it doesn't matter who you were, only who you are now." Before Evelyn could respond, the doorbell jingled again. Noah walked in, brushing the morning dust off his jacket. His eyes scanned the room and landed briefly on her. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, then vanished behind a polite nod. "Morning," he said, mostly to the waitress, but his tone carried enough warmth to include everyone. "Morning yourself," she replied. "Usual?" He smiled. "Yes, ma'am. To go, please." Evelyn tried to look casual, but her pulse quickened. She wasn't sure whether to speak or stay silent. The air between them felt charged, not awkward, exactly, but aware. Mason was already tugging at Noah's sleeve. "It works, Mr. Noah. Look." He spun the toy, and the tiny blades whirred. Noah's smile widened, genuine and unguarded. "Told you patience pays off. See, Miss Chase?" Mason said proudly. "He's like a real pilot." Evelyn froze, caught in the boy's enthusiasm. "Yes," she said softly, "he certainly is." Noah met her eyes, then a brief, unreadable look that held neither resentment nor pride, just calm recognition. He took his coffee, thanked the waitress, and turned to leave. As he passed her booth, he stopped for half a second. "Didn't expect to see you here, ma'am." "I could say the same," she replied. He nodded once, almost smiling. "Guess we both took a different route today." And with that, he stepped outside, the bell above the door ringing faintly in his wake. Evelyn sat there for a long moment, staring into her cup, the steam curling like questions she didn't yet know how to ask. Through the window, she watched him walk down the street, steady, unhurried, the morning light painting his figure in soft gold. Mason waved from the doorway, and Noah raised a hand in return before disappearing down the road toward the hangar. The boy's words echoed in her head. Even broken things can fly again. Evelyn stayed in that booth long after Noah had gone. The smell of coffee lingered in the air, and the hum of the diner wrapped around her like a soft blanket. Mason sat at the counter now, legs swinging as he stirred too much sugar into his chocolate milk. He was humming a tune that didn't quite have a melody, just joy. It reminded her of the days her father would whistle while fixing model planes in their old garage. She turned the cup in her hands, watching the steam fade, wondering how a man like Noah ended up cleaning hangar floors instead of commanding the skies. She had seen plenty of people lose their jobs, but what she saw in him wasn't loss, it was restraint, like someone who chose silence because speaking would open wounds too deep to close. When she left the cafe, the morning had ripened into soft heat. Across the street, the airfield shimmered with light. A row of small aircraft sat like patient birds waiting for flight. She walked the distance instead of driving, her heels tapping against the sun-warmed pavement. Sam Harlow was outside, tightening a panel on one of the older helicopters. His faded cap was pulled low, but he noticed her instantly. "Well, look who traded board meetings for breakfast," he teased. She smiled faintly. "Do I look out of place?" "Only because you're smiling. That's new." She rolled her eyes, but the comment didn't sting. "I saw Noah helping that boy from town. Mason, I think." Sam nodded. "That kid worships him. Comes by every morning before the school bus. Noah's got a soft spot for people who still believe in things." "Is that what you call it?" "I call it grace," Sam said, setting his wrench down. "He doesn't say much, but when he does, it's usually worth listening to." Evelyn leaned against the railing, watching Noah across the hangar yard. He was coiling an extension cord, careful and deliberate. His motions had a rhythm to them, steady, thoughtful, almost meditative. She spoke quietly. When my father ran this place, he said pilots were born with two gifts, courage and humility. He used to tell me the second one was harder to keep. Sam smiled. Your old man was right, and Noah's got both, though I think he'd rather keep that a secret. She looked at him sharply. You know something. Everyone around here knows something, Sam replied. We just don't say it out loud. Man's been through enough already. Before she could ask what that meant, Mason's laughter echoed from across the hangar. The boy had slipped inside, waving his toy helicopter again. Mr. Noah, look, it still flies! Evelyn and Sam turned to watch. Noah crouched down, steadying the small plastic toy in his hand. You take care of this one, all right. Not every bird gets a second chance. The boy nodded solemnly. Like you? Noah froze for half a second. Then he smiled, faintly. Something like that. Evelyn felt a strange lump in her throat. The boy's innocence and Noah's quiet tone pressed against something in her she hadn't let herself feel in years. Tenderness, maybe even longing. After Mason left, Noah stood up and noticed her watching. Their eyes met across the hangar, a silent exchange neither could define. She walked toward him before she could think twice. I didn't mean to interrupt, she said. You weren't, he replied. Voice calm as always. You're good with him. The kid trusts you. Noah looked away, the sunlight catching the edge of his jaw. Kids don't judge. They just see who you are. She nodded slowly. Maybe adults should try that. For a moment, there was only the sound of wind pushing through the open hangar doors, the faint rattle of chains, the desert stretching endlessly beyond. Evelyn wanted to ask 1,000 questions about where he'd learned to fly, about what he'd lost, but all she could manage was, thank you, for yesterday, and for this morning. He gave a small nod. You don't have to thank me, ma'am. Maybe I do, she said. Maybe I've been too good at forgetting how. Noah studied her face, searching for something. Whatever he found made his eyes soften. For what it's worth, he said quietly. Your father built a place that gave people a reason to keep going. You're doing fine keeping that alive. She blinked, caught off guard. You knew my father? Not personally, he said, but people still talk about him. A good man who led with his heart. Those are rare. The mention of her father felt like sunlight through a crack, painful, yet warm. She wanted to ask how Noah could possibly know that. But before she could, the sound of an approaching aircraft filled the air. A charter helicopter descended nearby, its blades whipping up dust. Evelyn and Noah stepped back as it landed, the noise swallowing their unfinished conversation. When it settled, she turned to speak again, but he was already walking toward the maintenance shed. The dust hung in the air long after he disappeared inside. Evelyn stood there, watching the swirling particles catch the light like small suspended stars. Somewhere deep down, something began to shift, not a grand revelation, just the quiet start of understanding. Through the window of the cafe behind her, Mason pressed his face to the glass, still waving the toy helicopter at her. She smiled and waved back, unaware that in that simple gesture, something like grace had begun to take root. And for the first time in years, Evelyn Chase didn't feel entirely alone. By afternoon, the desert was breathing heat again. The red cliffs shimmered in the distance, and the dry wind carried the faint scent of jet fuel and sage. Evelyn stood outside the hangar, squinting at the horizon where the air blurred into waves. The sunlight seemed sharper than usual, the kind that made everything feel too bright, too exposed. She had spent the morning reviewing reports in her office, trying to focus on numbers, maintenance logs, invoices, things that couldn't feel, but her mind refused to stay still. Every time she looked at the new helicopter gleaming on the tarmac, she remembered Noah's hands guiding the controls, remembered Mason's laughter, remembered how her own voice had sounded that day she mocked him. She hated that memory now. Boss? Sam's voice cut through the hum of engines. Weather looks good. You sure you want to run the test flight today? Evelyn nodded, shielding her eyes. Yes, we need to show reliability to investors tomorrow. I'll fly it myself this time. Sam hesitated, glancing toward the maintenance shed. You want Noah nearby, just in case? She frowned. Why would I? Then she stopped. She could hear the unspoken truth in Sam's tone. Trust the man who's already proven he can handle the sky. After a moment, she sighed. Fine. Call him. Minutes later, Noah appeared, wiping his hands on a rag. He wore his usual gray jumpsuit, the knees faded, the cuffs frayed. The desert light outlined him like a silhouette carved from bronze. "You wanted me?" he asked. "Yes. We're running a short test. I'd like you to supervise the ground crew." He nodded once. Understood. No sarcasm. No hint of the past. Just quiet professionalism. Somehow that made her respect him even more and made her nervous in ways she couldn't quite name. By 2 o'clock, the airfield hummed with motion. The helicopter rested in the center of the pad, its blades glinting. A handful of technicians checked gauges and fuel lines. The wind picked up, brushing through the dry grass at the edges of the tarmac. Evelyn climbed into the cockpit, strapped in, and looked over the console. The controls felt different now, heavier, almost personal. She exhaled slowly, remembering the way her father used to say, "Every pilot flies not with their hands, but with their heart." Through the windshield, she saw Noah standing at the edge of the pad, his gaze steady. He gave a small nod, almost imperceptible, but enough to remind her she wasn't alone up there. "Let's begin," she said into the radio. The engine roared to life, the familiar vibration filling her bones. The rotors sliced the air faster and faster until the machine lifted from the ground. Dust swirled, light shimmered, and for a brief second she felt that familiar thrill, the power of weightlessness, the hum of control. Everything worked perfectly for the first minute. The gauges stayed green, the balance steady. Then a sharp metallic pop cut through the noise, a sound no pilot ever wants to hear. The helicopter jerked sideways, then shuddered violently. "Evelyn, pull back. You've got a pressure drop!" Sam's voice crackled through the headset. "I see it," she answered, gripping the stick, trying to steady the bird. The alarm blared in her ears. Below, Noah had already started moving, shouting orders to the crew. "Clear the pad! Move that compressor out of the way! Sam, kill the auxiliary power feed!" The world seemed to tilt and roar all at once. Evelyn's heart pounded. Sweat blurred her vision. The helicopter lurched, dipped, then stabilized barely. The altimeter trembled between 10 and 15 feet. Come on," she whispered, adjusting the controls. "Hold for me." For one terrifying moment, she saw the reflection of her father's old crash photo flash in her mind, the twisted wreckage, the smoke, the look on his face, the day he told her that fear was every pilot's co-pilot. And then, just like that, she froze. "Evelyn," Sam shouted, "cut throttle, now." But her hand wouldn't move. Then the voice came, calm and steady through the radio. "Let go, ma'am. Let me guide you down." It was Noah. She didn't even question how he'd gotten access to the radio frequency. She obeyed. "Good," he said. "Now, lower your collective slowly. You've still got lift in reserve. Feel it, don't fight it." She did as he said. The machine groaned, then steadied. Dust rose in a golden cloud around the landing pad. The world narrowed to the rhythm of his voice. "Easy," he murmured. "There you go. Keep breathing." The helicopter touched the ground, skidding only slightly before settling. The engine whined, then went still. Silence. Her hands shook as she pulled off the headset. Through the glass, she saw Noah signaling for the crew to stand down. The tension in the air cracked like glass under heat. When she climbed out, her knees almost gave way. Noah was already there, standing beside the open door. "You did fine," he said simply. "I nearly crashed," she whispered. "You didn't," he replied. "That's what matters." The wind swept through the hangar, carrying the dry scent of sage and oil. She looked at him, really looked at him, and felt something shift inside. Gratitude, humility, maybe even admiration. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking on the word. He nodded once, eyes soft. "You were never really out of control. You just forgot to trust yourself." And for the first time since her father's death, Evelyn felt like a student again, not a boss, not a leader, but someone relearning how to fly. But the moment wasn't done teaching her. From across the tarmac came a shout, urgent, terrified. "Help! Over here!" Both she and Noah turned. Near the second hangar, a piece of detached metal lay twisted on the ground, pinning one of the younger mechanics beneath it. Smoke curled from the edge of the damaged rotor housing. Noah was already running before Evelyn could think. Noah reached the fallen mechanic in seconds. The smell of burning metal hit first, sharp, acrid, and alive. The young man, barely 20, lay half-conscious, his leg trapped beneath a warped piece of landing gear. Blood streaked the dust near his boot. The others hesitated, frozen by the chaos. But Noah didn't. "Sam!" he shouted. "Cut the main breaker to that panel now. And get me a crowbar." "Afe." Sam sprinted for the tool chest without a word. Evelyn followed, heart pounding so loud she could barely hear the wind howling through the open doors. Her heels sank into the soft dirt as she knelt beside them. "Oh, God," she whispered, seeing the boy's pale face. He's breathing," Noah said firmly, his voice calm and unshakable. "We've got a pulse, just need to keep him still." His movements were sure, almost clinical. He pressed his hand to the mechanic's neck, checking circulation, then tore a strip from his sleeve to bind the wound. "Give me that bar." Sam slid it over, and Noah wedged it under the mangled frame. "On 3, he said, sweat beating down his temples. 1, 2, he strained, muscles tensing, jaw locked. 3. The metal screeched, but lifted just enough for him to drag the boy's leg free. Evelyn pulled him back, her hands trembling. "Get me clean rags," Noah ordered, "and a first aid kit." Someone ran. Evelyn tore her scarf from around her neck and pressed it against the wound. Blood soaked the fabric instantly. "I can't stop it," she gasped. Noah's eyes met hers steady, grounding. "You're doing fine, ma'am. Keep pressure right there." His voice carried something she hadn't heard since her father: authority, without arrogance, confidence without cruelty. The chaos around them seemed to fade into the rhythm of his commands. When the paramedics finally arrived 10 minutes later, the bleeding had slowed. The young man was conscious, whispering weakly, "Thank you." Noah stepped back, breathing hard but calm, his hands stained crimson. The lead medic crouched beside him, assessing the makeshift bandage. "Who did this?" "He did," Evelyn said, pointing. The medic looked up at Noah, then nodded in quiet awe. "Good work. You might have just saved his leg." Noah didn't reply. He only exhaled and turned away, wiping his hands on a towel. Evelyn followed him a few steps, her shoes crunching in the gravel. "You knew exactly what to do," she said softly. "I've seen this before," he replied, still facing away. 100 times. There was no pride in his tone, only the tired weight of memory. She hesitated. "You were a pilot, weren't you? Not just any pilot. A rescue one." He didn't turn around. "Doesn't matter now." "It matters to me," she said. "You saved that boy's life. You saved mine." He finally looked at her then, his eyes filled with something deeper than pain, humility. "I didn't do it for you," he said quietly. "I did it because I know what it's like to watch someone die while everyone else just stands there." The words hit her like wind against glass. She wanted to ask who, wanted to reach for the story, buried behind that scar and those calm eyes. But before she could, Sam walked over. "They're taking the kid to the hospital," he said, voice shaky with relief. "They said he'll make it." Noah nodded once. "Good." Sam looked between them, then added in a low voice, "You're one hell of a man, Noah. Not that I didn't already know, just doing what had to be done." As the ambulance pulled away, its siren fading into the desert air, the hangar fell into an uneasy quiet. Dust swirled around them, and the golden afternoon light slanted across the floor, catching every floating particle like glitter. Evelyn sat on a nearby crate, her adrenaline crashing into exhaustion. Noah stood a few feet away, rinsing his hands at a water spigot, the blood swirling into pink rivulets before disappearing into the sand. "You said you've seen it before," she said softly. "What happened to you?" He looked up, water dripping from his fingers. "You don't want to know. And maybe I do." For the first time since she'd met him, Noah's composure cracked. He met her eyes, and behind the quiet surface, she saw grief, old, unhealed, buried under years of silence. 6 years ago, he said, voice low, there was an air rescue during a wildfire in California. 3 men went up. Only 1 came back down. He paused, his throat tightening. That was me. Evelyn's breath caught. You were the one who... He shook his head. No, I was the one who lived. Ugh. The words hung between them, heavier than the desert heat. She didn't know what to say. No apology could touch that kind of pain. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. No, I didn't know. You weren't supposed to, he said simply. That's why I came here, to stop being someone people talked about. The wind picked up again, tugging at the loose sleeve of his jumpsuit, carrying his words into the empty sky. They stood there in silence, two people bound by different kinds of loss, both suddenly aware of how fragile life could be. When Noah finally turned toward the horizon, the sun was beginning to sink behind the cliffs.
You should go home, ma'am. You've had enough excitement for one day.
She wanted to argue, but he was right. She watched him walk toward the hangar doors, the light catching his outline like fire against gold. He paused, looked back just once, and said, "Sometimes the sky takes more than it gives, but it never forgets who learned from it." Then he disappeared into the shadows, leaving Evelyn standing in the amber light, her heart echoing with the truth she hadn't been ready to hear. That evening, long after the crew had gone home, she sat alone in her office. Outside, the wind still whispered through the open windows, dry, restless, endless. On her desk lay her father's old note. To fly high, you must first learn to kneel. For the first time, she understood what it meant. Night fell quiet over Sedona. The hangar lights shimmered against the desert sky, and Evelyn Chase sat alone in her office, the glow of her monitor tracing tired lines on her face. Curiosity or guilt pushed her to type, Noah Reddington. The company record showed nothing unusual, too clean. She dug deeper military databases, pilot registries, until the truth appeared. Captain Noah Reddington, U.S. Air Rescue Division, commended. Retired after Mission Echo wildfire, 2018. 3 fatalities, 1 survivor. Her hand trembled. She remembered that tragedy on the news years ago. The survivor had vanished afterward until now. Evelyn looked out the window, toward the hangar still glowing faintly under the moon. He's been carrying this alone, she thought, and I treated him like nothing. She printed the report, folded it carefully into an envelope, and walked to the hangar. Inside, Noah sat alone at the workbench, polishing a rotor blade that didn't need cleaning. You should be home, she said softly. He didn't look up. Home's not really a place anymore. She stepped closer, laying the envelope on the table. I found your file. Noah froze. The silence stretched. You read it. I did. You saved people, Noah. You shouldn't have been the one blamed. He exhaled slowly, eyes fixed on the metal in his hands. I wasn't blamed. I took it. Someone had to. Evelyn's throat tightened. That's not redemption, that's punishment. Maybe they're the same thing, he murmured. For a moment, only the desert wind filled the space. Evelyn spoke again, her voice trembling. I lost someone too. My father. A test flight gone wrong. I thought pushing harder, being tougher would make me like him. But all it did was make me small. Noah finally looked at her, and in his eyes, she saw understanding, not pity. We both stopped flying for the same reason, he said. Different skies, same fall. Evelyn smiled faintly through her tears. Then maybe it's time we climb again. He hesitated, then opened the envelope. His old service photo looked back at him, younger, prouder, unbroken. They cleared you, she whispered. You deserve peace. He folded the paper gently. Peace isn't given, he said. It's earned one good day at a time. When she turned to leave, she paused at the door.
Tomorrow morning, she said, I want you at the team briefing as a pilot.
He gave her a long look, half disbelief, half gratitude. I'm not that man anymore. You still are, she said, smiling softly. You just forgot. As dawn brushed the horizon, Evelyn walked out into the cool desert air. For the first time in years, she felt something light return to her. The simple, steady belief that maybe people, like planes, could rise again after falling. Inside the hangar, Noah whispered to the empty room, maybe it's time. And when he turned off the light, the darkness no longer felt like hiding. It felt like rest. The sun rose over Sedona like a slow apology, painting the cliffs in amber. Inside the hangar, Evelyn Chase stood before her crew, the smell of jet fuel and coffee mingling in the crisp air. For the first time in years, her voice carried warmth instead of command. Yesterday reminded me that this company isn't built on steel or money, she said. It's built on people the kind who stay calm when others fall apart. Then she turned toward the door. Noah, come in. The room went silent. Noah Reddington stepped forward, wearing his old gray flight jacket. A few whispers rippled through the crowd, then Sam Harlow began to clap. The sound spread until the hangar echoed with it. Evelyn smiled. You all know him as our maintenance man. But before that, he was Captain Noah Reddington, U.S. Air Rescue Division. Starting today, he'll be assisting in flight safety and pilot training. Noah looked uncomfortable under the applause. When it faded, he said quietly, I'm no captain anymore. Evelyn met his eyes. You don't need the title. You already lead by example. After the meeting, the crew scattered to their stations, but something in the air had changed. The hangar felt lighter, as if everyone was breathing easier. Later that morning, Noah stood near the test pad, guiding a young technician through pre-flight checks. His tone was calm, patient, the kind that made people want to listen. Evelyn watched from the sidelines, a faint smile tugging at her lips. When Mason, the boy from the Maple Sky Cafe, arrived with his toy helicopter, Noah crouched beside him, showing him how to balance the tiny rotors. See? Every machine needs trust, just like people do. Evelyn joined them. And sometimes it needs a little faith, too. Mason grinned.
Mr. Noah says even broken things can fly again.
Noah chuckled softly. Smart kid. Evelyn looked at him, sunlight glinting in her eyes. He learned from the right teacher. For a long moment, neither said anything. The desert wind passed between them, carrying the faint hum of engines, a sound that once meant fear, now something closer to peace. Mason tilted his head. Miss Chase, when are you going to fly? Evelyn laughed, glancing at Noah. Maybe soon, Mason. Maybe sooner than you think. The boy ran off, spinning his toy in the air, its little blades catching the light. Evelyn and Noah watched him go, both smiling. Funny, Noah said quietly. 6 years ago, I thought the sky was done with me. And now? She asked. He looked toward the horizon, where the morning sun met the open desert. Now it feels like it's waiting. They stood there together as the sound of rotors began again, steady and strong, the heartbeat of a new beginning. The following afternoon, the Arizona sky stretched wide and cloudless. Heat shimmered over the runway, and the metallic scent of fuel hung heavy in the air. Evelyn Chase stood beside the helicopter she once feared, the same model that had almost cost her everything weeks before. Only this time, she wasn't alone. Noah Reddington walked toward her, the sun at his back, his flight jacket zipped halfway, the old insignia barely visible under years of wear. For the first time, he didn't look like a janitor. He looked like what he'd always been, a man born to the sky. You sure about this? He asked. Evelyn smiled, nervous but steady. You said everyone deserves a second flight. Let's see if you were right. Sam Harlow leaned against a fuel cart nearby, shaking his head. If the boss crashes this thing, I'm retiring. Evelyn shot him a grin. Then I'll make sure to land gently. Mason was there too, sitting cross-legged on the hangar steps, his toy helicopter spinning slowly in his hands. He looked up at Noah. You're flying again, Mr. Noah? Maybe just a little, Noah said, winking. Bring her back safe, the boy said seriously. She's not used to heights. Evelyn laughed, touched by the child's honesty. I'll do my best, Captain. Noah climbed into the cockpit first, checking each gauge, every lever. His movements were smooth, instinctive, like muscle memory waking after a long sleep. Evelyn settled into the co-pilot seat beside him, her hands trembling slightly. You ready? He asked. She nodded. Let's fly. The rotors began to spin, slicing through the hot afternoon air. Dust rose in golden spirals around them. The machine vibrated, alive again, impatient to leave the ground. Easy on the collective, Noah said calmly. Feel the weight shift beneath you. Don't fight it, guide it. Evelyn inhaled slowly, her palms steadying on the controls. The helicopter lifted inches, then feet until the hangar shrank below them, and the desert stretched out like an ocean of copper and light. She exhaled a shaky laugh. I'd forgotten how this feels. Freedom? Noah asked. No, she said softly. Forgiveness. He looked at her, surprised by the word. For a moment, neither spoke. The world below was silent, except for the rhythmic thrum of the blades. They flew low along the cliffs, the sunlight painting the rocks in shades of red and gold. From up here, the scars of the desert looked like art, imperfect, beautiful and alive. Noah guided her through a turn. "You've got good instincts," he said. "Must have learned from the best," she replied. He chuckled. "Careful. Flattery makes me rusty." They flew in comfortable silence for a while. Then, as they circled back toward the airfield, Evelyn said quietly, "You were right, Noah. The sky doesn't forget who learns from it." He smiled faintly. "And it forgives those who do." The radio crackled suddenly. Sam's voice came through. "You two lovebirds planning to come back down? Or should we send dinner up?" Evelyn rolled her eyes but couldn't stop laughing. "Copy that, Sam. We're bringing her home." As they approached the pad, Noah reached for the controls, but Evelyn stopped him. "Let me." He hesitated, then nodded. She guided the helicopter down, slow and sure, landing so gently that even the dust barely stirred. When the engine wound down, the silence that followed was almost holy. Outside, the crew cheered. Mason jumped up, waving his toy in the air. "You did it! You didn't crash!" Evelyn opened the door, laughing as the boy ran toward her. Noah climbed out behind her, the warm wind tugging at his sleeves. "Feels different up there now," she said. "How so?" he asked. "Before, I flew to prove something," she replied. "Today, I flew to remember why it mattered." He nodded slowly. "That's the only reason worth flying for." End 1. They stood side by side as the sun began to set behind the cliffs, the sky glowing orange and violet. Mason's laughter echoed through the hangar, and somewhere in that sound was everything they had lost and everything they had found again. Evelyn turned to Noah. "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were just a man trying to disappear." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I was, but sometimes disappearing's just another way of being found." The wind carried his words away, scattering them into the burning horizon. As they watched the last light fade, Evelyn felt something inside her settle, not the end of a story, but the calm that comes when you finally land somewhere safe. For Noah, it wasn't a return to the sky, it was a return to himself. And for the first time in a long time, the hangar didn't feel like a place of work. It felt like home. The morning after the flight was cool and still. A faint mist hung over the red cliffs of Sedona, and the hangar sat quiet, bathed in pale gold light. For the first time in years, the air inside felt peaceful, no echo of arrogance, no tension, only calm. Evelyn Chase arrived earlier than usual, a cup of coffee in hand. The crew hadn't shown up yet. The silence was almost sacred. On her desk sat a plain white envelope, her name written in neat, steady handwriting. Evelyn. Her pulse quickened. She recognized that handwriting instantly. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single page, folded twice. Evelyn. "Some skies aren't meant to be conquered, only understood. You reminded me of that yesterday. I hadn't felt peace in the air since the day I lost my team, but flying beside you brought it back. Thank you for giving an old pilot a reason to look up again. I've accepted an offer from the Air Rescue Foundation in Flagstaff. They train emergency response pilots for wildfire zones. It feels right to go back, to teach what nearly broke me. Maybe this is how I make it matter. Don't think of this as goodbye. Think of it as altitude. We're both just climbing in different directions. Keep the sky honest. Noah." The words blurred for a moment before her eyes cleared. She read them again, slower this time, letting each one settle like dust after a storm. She didn't notice Sam until he knocked gently on the doorframe. "You okay, boss?" Evelyn smiled through her tears. "He's leaving." Sam nodded. "Figured he would. Some folks can't stay grounded forever." "He's going back to teach," she said softly. "Rescue training." Sam grinned. "Sounds about right. Some birds were never meant for hangars." Evelyn walked to the window. Outside, the morning sun spilled across the runway. On the far end, she spotted him, Noah, standing beside a pickup truck, the same calm stillness about him. Mason was there too, handing him the little toy helicopter. "Keep it," Noah told him. "Someday, you'll fly the real thing." Mason hugged him tight. "Promise you'll come back?" "I don't make promises I can't keep," Noah said gently. "But I'll see you in the sky." Evelyn hurried outside before he could leave. "You weren't going to say goodbye?" Noah turned, smiling faintly. "I left a note. Figured I'd spare you the part where I drive off into the sunrise. You're terrible at goodbyes, she said, half laughing, half crying. Good, he replied. Means we'll need another hello. They stood facing each other, no grand gestures, no dramatic music, just quiet understanding, the kind that doesn't need words. Evelyn reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a folded photograph, an old picture of her father beside a younger her, standing in front of their first helicopter. She handed it to Noah. He used to say some pilots fly with skill, but the best fly with purpose. You reminded me what he meant. Noah looked at the photo, his expression softening. He'd be proud of you, you know. Maybe, she whispered, but I think he'd thank you first. A small breeze picked up, carrying the faint scent of sage and fuel. Noah tucked the photo into his pocket, then offered his hand. Take care of them, Evelyn. They'll follow your lead. I will, she said, shaking his hand firmly. And you keep teaching them how to fall and rise again. He smiled, that same quiet, humble smile she had come to recognize as strength. That's the only thing worth teaching. Then he turned, climbed into the truck, and started the engine. The tires crunched softly against the gravel. Evelyn watched as he drove down the long airstrip, the desert sun rising higher behind him. When the truck disappeared beyond the ridge, she stood there for a while, listening. Somewhere far above, a single helicopter passed through the blue morning sky. She tilted her head, smiling through the tears that refused to fall. Fly safe, Noah, she whispered. Keep the sky honest. Back inside the hangar, Mason's little toy helicopter rested on the workbench, silent, waiting. Evelyn picked it up and set it near the window, where the sunlight caught its blades and made them shine. Outside, the world moved on, engines started, voices rose, the hum of life returning. But in that brief, golden stillness, everything felt right again. Because forgiveness had done what flight always promised. It lifted them both higher than fear, higher than pride, into a place where the heart finally knew peace. And somewhere in the endless blue above, a man who once fell had found his wings again. Sometimes the quietest goodbyes echo the loudest. As Evelyn watched Noah's truck disappear beyond the ridge, the morning sun wrapped the airfield in gold, and the hangar that once smelled of regret now breathed peace. The story of two people who had fallen in different ways came full circle, not through triumph or wealth, but through understanding. Somewhere above that desert sky, forgiveness finally took flight. In the end, this story reminds us that love and redemption can rebuild even what life once broke. That kindness, when given freely, can change a person's path more surely than judgment ever could. And that everyone, no matter how far they've fallen, deserves a second chance to belong, to be seen, to come home, like a porch light that burns quietly through the night. A single act of compassion can guide us back when we lose our way. Maybe that's what life is really about, not how high we climb, but who we lift when we rise. Because happiness, much like a Sunday meal shared with family, feels warmer when it's passed around the table of the heart. So, dear friends, take a moment to think about what this story stirred in you. Have you ever forgiven someone or yourself and felt lighter because of it? If this story touched your heart, leave a 1 in the comments. And if you think it could be told better, press 0 and tell me why. Either way, thank you for flying with us tonight, and may your skies always stay clear, your heart always kind.